morning. Good morning. He is risen.
He is risen indeed.
Indeed he is. My mom, who is no longer with us, used to love on Easter morning to, as I would come down, from my bedroom, she would greet me with, "He is risen." And it was expected that, of course, I would respond, "He is risen indeed." And I, being the, Nick Snooks, my mom would call me, that I was, she would say, "He is risen." And I would say, "You bet your life." "Ow, you're not supposed to say that." She'd get all upset. That was our little joke. One year when my son, I have three sons, my youngest son, Ethan, when he was 7, it was Easter Sunday, and I was getting him dressed and ready to go to church, and woke him up, and started to, put his clothes on him and stuff. And I said, "Hey, you know what today is?" "No, I don't know what's today." "Today is Easter." "Oh, you know what Easter is?" "No, I don't know what Easter is." "Oh, Easter, Jesus, he lived a long time ago, and he made some people angry by what he taught, and they killed him. And they put him in a grave. And then 3 days later, he rose from the dead." And my son said, "Ooh, tricky." It is pretty tricky, isn't it? It's an amazing thing. We say, almost Pavlovian response, "He is risen."
He is risen indeed.
But do we really believe that?
You bet.
Do you really believe that this guy who lived 2,000 some years ago, that he died? I mean, died dead. Dead as a doornail, put in a grave, and decomposed for 3 days, and came back to life? Do we really believe that? Wow, that's a big deal, isn't it? That's really the big question of our faith. It really is the question that puts everything in perspective. I mean, if Jesus really died on Good Friday, and 3 days later, after being in a dark tomb with a several-ton rock in front of it and a garrison of Roman soldiers guarding him, he came back to life and showed himself to people, that puts an end to all the questions about, is there a God? Does he have a plan for us? Did he create the universe? Is there purpose to life? What is that purpose? It changes everything. This event that we talk about today and kind of lightly say, he's risen indeed, that changes everything if that's really true. It's the central doctrine of Christianity. Everything that we believe hinges on this fact, on this one day. It's monumentally important that we understand this, and that we understand the implications of he is risen. He is risen indeed. Think of it this way. I got to thinking about it, and I thought, imagine, if you will, that you're at home and a storm comes through and knocks out the lights in your house. So you're there, you can't watch TV, so you've got your flashlight on, and you're, reading by flashlight. And after you've read a while, you decide, I think I'll go in the kitchen and get a snack. So you walk into the kitchen, and as your flashlight beam kind of searches around the kitchen, all of a sudden, what do you see? But you spot a lion. There's a lion in your kitchen. You now have a completely new set of priorities, prayers, and practices, don't you? If you found a 450-pound lion, that's how big lions are, in your kitchen, you would not be looking for Oreos and chips anymore, right? You would have a whole different agenda. You would be about not upsetting the lion. You would be about trying to back away. How am I going to get out of this situation? Something has radically changed in my life. The fact that you believe that there's a lion in the room with you would change the way you live, wouldn't it? If you came across a lion like that. Well, Jesus is the Lion of Judah. And, there's a lot of you here who I don't know very well. I'm kind of new to the church and haven't met everybody. Maybe you're here today and you haven't met or seen the lion yet. You're wondering if he's really there. Maybe you're here because your parents have brought you and they're convinced that there's a lion in the room, but you're just not so sure yet. Well, today I hope to point out some evidence to you. Sort of point my flashlight around and say, look over here. There's some muddy lion tracks right here. And over here is some lion fur. And do you hear that rumbling roar of the lion? I want to point some of that stuff out to you. Kind of build a case that you are in fact in the room with a lion. Some people shy away from this a little bit and just want to say, hey, I just believe it. I don't need to know the facts or the evidence behind it. I actually heard a pastor one time say, I don't get into that whole arena of apologetics. That's what it's called, where you learn to defend your faith. And he said, I don't get into apologetics because I believe that Christ and the Bible are like a lion. He actually used that analogy. And he said, a lion doesn't need to be defended. And I thought about that, and I thought, what I'm going to do today, and what I encourage us all to do, is not defend the lion, because he's right, a lion doesn't need any defense. We need to learn apologetics and the facts behind our faith for ourselves and for others, because they're in the room with a lion, and they don't realize it. And we need to figure out a way to say, hey, here's some evidence. You may not see it, but here's evidence that this is actually a lion. This isn't just a story about a lion. This is a real lion. You need to change the way you live, and change your priorities and your prayers and your preferences, because it's real. So we're going to take a look at that. We're going to look at a little bit of the facts behind our faith. Christianity is really unique in this sense, that our faith is based on facts. We believe what we do, not just because, you got to believe in something. We don't believe what we do because, having Jesus in my life is such a comfort. It's just such a comfort. Those things that's true. Although I think you can make a pretty good case that if you really follow Christ, he's going to, at times anyway, make your life a little more uncomfortable than comfortable, because he's always interested in our growing, isn't he? He's always kind of goading us and pushing us along, and he's not really that interested in us being comfortable. He's interested in us making a difference. He's interested in us in growing closer to him, and sometimes that leads to discomfort. But the Christian religion, the Christian faith, is unique in that it's based on facts. Buddhists believe in nirvana without a shred of evidence. Mormons believe in these gold tablets. They don't have a shred of evidence. Can't find them. Hindus believe in reincarnation without a shred of evidence. I'm always amazed that anybody believes in reincarnation. There's not a shred of evidence. But Christianity is based in evidence, and our faith is not a blind faith, but rather a faith in the facts. It's kind of like a jury would make a decision based on the facts. They don't have firsthand knowledge of the circumstances. We weren't there when Christ was crucified, but we're able to take a look at the evidence, and we embrace it if the facts add up and turn out to be worthy of our faith, which today we're going to talk about and show that that's true. So what proof is there of the resurrection of Jesus Christ? I'm glad you asked. We're going to get into that. There's an incredible amount of evidence, actually, that will give us great assurance that our faith is not misplaced. As a matter of fact, there's so much evidence. I once did a talk when I worked with college students where it was called Tons of Evidence. I would just go through rapid fire many bits of evidence, and as I did that, students brought up on stage large boxes with the bit of evidence kind of written on there until we had compiled a huge pile of these boxes, all the evidence. And it really gets to the point for myself, and I'm sure for many of you, that when you look at the evidence that's there, I'm only going to be able to touch on a little bit of it here today, but as you look at the evidence, it would take me far more faith to believe that this is not true than to believe that it's true. There's just that much evidence. If you want to look into more of the evidence than what I can cover here today, I want to recommend 3 books. One is called Evidence for the Resurrection by Josh McDowell and his son, Sean. Excellent book. There's also The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel, another great book. Both of these men started out as atheists who believed this is a crock. This whole Christianity thing. Josh McDowell used to say, before I was a Christian, I believed that Christians had 2 brains. One was lost and the other one was out looking for it. And he said, I believed that any fool could prove that Christianity was wrong, and I was one of them, and I'm going to do it, And so both of these men set out to prove Christianity is wrong and false and, baseless. And the evidence backfired on them, and they both embraced the faith and are strong advocates for our faith. The third one that I want to recommend is a relatively newer book called Cold Case Christianity. It's by a guy named J. Warner Wallace. He was a homicide detective, and so he looks at the death and resurrection of Christ from a homicide detective's point of view, and really does a good job of building evidence and building a case, just like you would in a courtroom. The Josh McDowell book covers many aspects of the resurrection. For our time today, I just wanted to look at 3 areas that I think hold the most weight when it comes to building a case that the resurrection actually occurred. As we talk about building a case, and again, an example came to my mind. If I wanted to help you, lose weight, let's say, and I said to you, you should try the Elvis Presley diet. Elvis, before he died, lost 100 pounds by eating nothing but peanut butter and banana sandwiches. Before you put your faith in that diet, you might want some evidence. So I might show you, some pictures of Elvis to say, here's evidence that he was fat at one time, and here's some pictures of him when he was skinny. And I might bring forth some written evidence that says that his roadies and his guys in his band and whatnot saw him eat nothing but peanut butter and banana sandwiches and lost weight. And if I further went on to say that, these people who survived past Elvis's death continue to this day to use this peanut butter and banana sandwich diet to lose weight, and they're being tortured to death, in some cases being put to death for their belief in this diet, but they continue to stick with that diet. You would say, wow, that seems, like a lot of proof that they really believe that this diet works. They're going to their deaths for it. Well, we're going to look at some similar evidence today. First thing that I want to look at, first fact of the resurrection, is that Jesus, in fact, died on the cross. This is an important fact because some critics of Christianity will say, well, the reason Jesus appeared to people after Easter is because he never really died. This is called the Swoon Theory. He sort of passed out on the cross. And they put him in the grave and he revived, and hey, he came back and said, oh, look at me, I rose from the dead. And he didn't really die. So we need to look at, is there evidence that he actually died? And 4 things come to mind. First of all, it's recorded in all 4 Gospels that Jesus died. And I could talk on and on and on, and we'll cover this maybe in another sermon, the reliability of the Bible. This book that I hold in my hand here, the Bible, is an amazingly reliable book. I'm tempted right now to go into why it's so reliable, but for now, take my word for it. It's an amazingly reliable book. If nothing else, just know that the Dead Sea Scrolls proved, to large part, its reliability. The way it was translated is amazingly detailed. We won't get into it, but it's recorded in all 4 books, 4 Gospels that he died. Secondly, the nature of the crucifixion practically guarantees that Jesus died. You add to the crucifixion the fact that Jesus was whipped, brutally whipped. If you've ever seen the Passion of the Christ, you know what I'm talking about. He wore the crown of thorns. He carried the crossbar to his cross, and he was nailed to the cross. Virtually guarantees his death. Then, thirdly, you have the fact that a spear was thrust into his side to check to see if he was really dead. And the Gospels record that blood and water flowed from that wound when they thrust the sword into his side. And doctors will tell you that when your bodily fluids separate into blood and water, it's a sure sign of death. And then fourthly is the fact that Jesus' death is written about in what I would call extra-biblical texts. Books, historical book documents that are not the Bible, that are written by people who do not have a vested interest in Jesus or Christianity, people who are actually hostile witnesses, who don't want Christ and Christianity to be true, recorded that he died. Things like Cornelius Tacitus was a historian, the Jewish historian Josephus, and even in the Jewish Talmud records this fact. So Jesus died on the cross. Second fact is that the tomb of Jesus was empty. The Sunday after the crucifixion, Mary and the women went to anoint Jesus' body, and to their surprise, the tomb was opened and the body was gone. There's good reason to believe that the tomb was actually empty, as the women reported. First of all, the disciples preached right there in Jerusalem about the fact that Jesus' tomb was empty. If, in fact, it wasn't empty, it was still sealed and the body was in there, and the disciples were out, a short distance away, preaching that he had actually risen from the dead, it would have been a very simple thing to walk out to the tomb, reveal the body, show that these guys are all wet. He's right here. Here's the dead body. But nobody ever did that. Secondly, if Jesus was in the tomb, political and religious leaders who wanted to squelch this new religion that was starting would have produced the body to put an end to this sect of Christianity. But again, they never did. The third fact is that the women, women discovered the body. If you were a first century author trying to develop some story that made it sound like Jesus had risen from the dead, because women in the first century were not considered reliable witnesses, they were not even allowed to give testimony in a courtroom, you would not say that women found the tomb empty. You would want to have men find the tomb, and you would want them to be men of some import. So this points to the fact that Jesus, his tomb was empty. And then fourth of all, again, we have 4 eyewitness accounts all written in the Bible saying that the tomb is empty. So Jesus, in fact, died on the cross. Jesus, in fact, had an empty tomb. And then thirdly, Jesus' disciples really believed that he had appeared to them. First of all, scholars agree that early disciples sincerely believed that Jesus rose from the dead and personally appeared to them. Josh McDowell in his book writes this: a convincing line of evidence can be found in 1 Corinthians 15, verses 3 through 8, which is a short creed that records the death, burial, resurrection, and appearances of Jesus to Peter, James, the 12 disciples, and a group of 500 believers, and finally to Paul. And in this section, they record in this little creed that he appeared to 500, many of whom are still alive. So you could have gone and interviewed those people and said, did you really see him? And they would say, yes, I did. It wasn't like, remember 5 generations back, they saw him, you know, it would be like saying that JFK is still alive. Well, JFK was shot not that long ago. There are people alive today who could testify, no, I saw him. I saw that he was dead. So we have this fact. Secondly, we have the fact that all 11 disciples, minus Judas, spent the rest of their lives as poor outlaws, trying to tell others what they believed, and died horrible, horrible deaths, including being crucified upside down, being sawn in half, being skinned alive, having their heads chopped off, being shot through with arrows, boiled in oil, and all during these torturous deaths, not a single disciple ever said, hey, wait a minute, you know, the boiling oil, let's just cool it off for a minute. We made this up. You know, no one ever recanted, ever. 11 guys, all tortured to death, never recanted. They were convinced that Christ had shown up to them. This bit of evidence is the bit of evidence that convinced Chuck Colson. I don't know if you know who Charles Colson is. Go back about 6 presidents. We had President Nixon and the whole Watergate thing that happened. Well, he had a group of men around him that helped him pull off the whole Watergate fiasco. And Chuck Colson records this. Chuck Colson was one of the guys who worked with President Nixon. And Chuck Colson says this: here we were, some of the most powerful and well-educated men in the world, and yet we could not keep secret what the president and we had done. There's no way that this ragtag group of uneducated fishermen, in other words, those 11 disciples, could steal the body of Jesus and keep it a secret their whole lives and never recant, even as they're being killed. No way. It has to be true. So I've shown that there's evidence that Jesus actually died, that the tomb was actually empty with no body and no body was ever produced. And then there's the fact that he appeared to more than 500 people, many of whom, these disciples, though tortured, lived and died radically changed lives, professing his resurrection, and not a single person ever recanted and said, no, he really didn't. So, that's just a fraction of the evidence that we have time for today. But I want to ask you, kind of shift gears a little bit and ask you, where are you at with all this? Do you believe that Jesus died and rose again? If you do, you know, it's kind of like having the light turned on in a dark room. All of a sudden, there really is life after death. There really is a God. There really is a heaven. And all the things that Jesus said really need to be taken seriously. When he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through me. When he said, no one who wants to be my disciple can follow me unless he's willing to take up his cross and follow me. Those sayings now have new weight to them when we realize this really happened. Jesus really rose from the dead. I don't really understand people who can say, yeah, I believe that Jesus died and rose again, and It proves that he's God and he's got the answers to all of life's questions. But, I don't want to get carried away with this. I don't want to, become fanatical about it. I don't want to have this become a big deal in my life. I want, as one man wrote, I just want $3 worth of God, please. I found this poem. I would like to buy $3 worth of God, please. I would like to buy just a little of the Lord, not enough to explode my soul or disturb my sleep, not enough to control my life, just enough to equal a warm cup of milk, just enough to ease some of the pain from my guilt. I would like to buy $3 worth of God, please. I would like to find a love that's pocket-sized, not enough to make me love a black man, not enough to change my heart. I can only stand enough of God to take to church when I have the time. Just enough to equal a snooze in the sunshine. I want ecstasy, not transformation. I want the warmth of the womb, not a new birth. I would like to purchase a pound of the eternal in a paper sack, guaranteed or my money back. You see, I would like to buy $3 worth of God, please. Remember in the beginning of my sermon where I talked about what it would be like if you found yourself in a room with a lion. Now, if I was watching you from outside, maybe peeking through the window, and after the lion appeared, you continued to look for your snacks, you went about business as usual, I would think either you were really foolish or you don't really think that's a lion in the room with you. You're not convinced. Shouldn't we live differently if we really believe that he's risen? I think part of it is because oftentimes we talk about having Jesus be a part of our lives. And the way I picture this is if you had a bookshelf, a small bookshelf, and on the shelf were books, and they were labeled, my family, my job, my spouse, my hobbies, and then at some point you decide, I need to make Jesus a part of my life. And so you put a book on the shelf labeled Jesus. And sometimes we get into difficulties in our lives and we think, I got to go to that book marked Jesus and pull it out and look at it, and hopefully it gives me some answers, something that'll help me through. And people I've talked to will say, I went to that book and I pulled it out and I don't know, it didn't help. And part of it is because Jesus doesn't want to be a part of your life. Jesus was never meant to be one of the books on the bookshelf alongside your bookmarked hobbies and family. Jesus was meant to be the bookshelf that holds everything together, that you put your other things into, that Jesus was meant to be Lord of our lives, not just a part of our lives. So I guess my encouragement to you today as we celebrate the resurrection is, first of all, to ask yourself, do you truly believe that he rose from the dead? And if you're here and you're not convinced, we're glad you're here. Welcome. Please come again. But take a look at some of the evidence. Take a look at some of these books that I recommend. Talk to one of us. Keep digging. Ask some questions. We're convinced that you're in the room with a lion. And we want you to see him. As I mentioned before, he's even referred to in the Bible as the Lion of Judah. And again, there's a lot more evidence than I covered this morning. So I want to encourage you to keep looking. If you're here and you do believe, you're among those people who say, I do believe that Christ rose from the dead. I see it. I see the lion in the room. I want to just ask you and leave you with this question. Are you living in such a way that others, would peek in through the window of your life and see, oh yeah, he sees the lion. He's acting differently. Or are you just going about life, business as usual, and Jesus is a part of your life? He's just one of the books on the shelf. When you realize the supremacy of Jesus, the majesty as we sang about today, the reality that he actually died and rose again, that he is that lion in the room, it changes, it should change the way we live our lives. And I'm not talking about, being a religious nut, and encouraging you to be the guy who's dragging a cross through town. Although, when you really begin to see who Jesus is, you sort of understand that guy a little better, don't you? You kind of go, that guy sees it. I'm not sure that's what I would want to do, but man, he's doing something different. But I want to ask you to evaluate your life and say, are my priorities, my prayers, and my practices in such a way that outsiders would see something different? We have a faith based on facts, and I want to encourage you to celebrate today that he is risen. He is risen indeed. Amen?
Amen.
Let's pray together. Father, thank you that you created us in such a way that our hearts cannot embrace what our mind rejects. And you gave us enough evidence, you gave us overwhelming evidence, if we're really honest and take the time to evaluate it, such that our hearts can embrace and our minds can accept what your Son did. Lord, thank you that you sent him to die in our place, pay the penalty for our sins, so that we can have that relationship with you, so that we can celebrate these kinds of things. But Lord, I pray that we would live differently, because we know we're in the room with the lion. We're in the room with the Lion of Judah. We are people who are following Christ, who died, was buried, and rose again, showed himself to his disciples, and sent them on a mission that we're a part of. Lord, I pray that we would live differently because of it. I ask all this in your name.